Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is attorney Judie Saunders. Judie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Last week, after much anticipation, Attorney General Pam Bondi released the first phase of declassified files related to disgraced sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And the internet was largely disappointed after seeing what was revealed, as there were no major bombshells. But as an attorney, especially one with expertise litigating cases involving sexual abuse, what stuck out to you?
My first impression to the release was, as you stated before, it was threefold, really. A little bit disappointed, but disappointed for the reason that you stated. The area of practice and my area of concentration is sexual abuse. So the first thing that struck me about this release is to see the optics of what we know to be now a online influencer and a conservative podcaster kind of dancing on government property, our lawn, the White House lawn, the People's House, and seeing that with the Epstein files phase one. And the first thing I went to, if I'm a survivor and I'm seeing this optics of an individual dancing, there would be nothing but dread flowing through me, not knowing the extent of redactions. Redactions come in all certain forms and have specific definitions. Could they be linked? Could my information be out there? Could I be identified? And I'm just speaking in specifically if you are a survivor of the Epstein abuse. But then also just generally as a survivor, you're thinking to yourself, if you're in whatever state you're in, or if you're in federal court and you have a case pending, your attorney, your counselor has given you some type of assurances that your information will not be released. So that was the first thing that really struck me. Also, the kind of two related points are it was disappointing in the respect that there was not a lot of new information released. And it felt a little bit like an unjustified publicity stunt.
I think to your point, people are really salivating over getting these documents, getting more information, getting these files, getting what's called that list. We did see a lot of redactions in the documents. Can you explain from an attorney perspective why we're seeing all of those redactions and what information could be redacted?
Sure. So there's a number of things that could be redacted. The first thing that you're going to be thinking about is confidential information as to survivors' names, addresses, and other identifiers. Redactions can be as specific as that, or they can be generalized. And you're usually either working under some type of confidentiality agreement, some type of statute, some type of code. So redactions usually follow a rule. You could have redacted whole parts of paragraphs or pages. It really is depending on agreements between the parties or some type of procedure. So the first thing that I would expect to be redacted, I'm not sure to what extent. We heard reported in the news the Attorney General stating victim names. But there's other identifying information. So redactions, it really depends, and it could be a moving target, so to speak, on what exactly is redacted.
A lot of this information that we saw in what AG Pam Bondi described as phase one was reportedly used in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. So does this release have any impact on her case? Normally, would that have any impact? What do you think?
If I'm Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, my antennas are going to be up right now. What they're thinking about and what they're looking for are two things. One, she was convicted under a statute that dealt with conspiracy. Oddly enough, there were no other individuals convicted with her. I'm sure that I'm not that familiar with the intricacies of that case and any possible appeals that could be pending. But one thing that I would be appealing just in a general sense is where are the other participants, targets, other wrongdoers in this conspiracy? I would be looking to this release to see if it possibly names or has the real conspirators if I were her attorneys, and that may be an impact. that'll have on her case. The other thing that may impact is, does this release of new evidence, does it have newly discovered evidence or information that could be used or impact her case? So those are two things that I would be interested in that may be impactful to Ms. Maxwell.
And to your point, I think that's what a lot of people want to see. They want to see who the other wrongdoers are in this conspiracy, because as of right now, it's Jeffrey Epstein, it's Ghislaine Maxwell. They want more names. And the release of the first phase of documents was criticized by both parties, people calling it everything from a nothing burger to people saying that they were disappointed that, as you said, it was a publicity stunt, to even some people calling for AG Bondi's resignation. So what do you think people are expecting to see? And based on the redactions that we saw, do you think they're ever going to see it?
What will they ever see it? It depends a lot on what your perspective, what your intentions, and what your goals are. Whether it's political, whether it's in private industry, public servants, that's what we've been promised. What we've gotten so far are just further accusations, further corroborations of information we already knew against an individual that is now deceased, Jeffrey Epstein. It's my understanding that myself and fellow American citizens are looking for are the names of objective names of individuals that participated in the sexual abuse, the silencing, and the concealment. I think what people are also looking for are what institutions, what mechanics, what tools were used to set up and continue to operate this very sinister and evil operation that hurt so many people. So by that I mean, were there banks involved? Were there other individuals? Were there other institutions? What systems made it possible for this organization, Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of children? Who else was involved? And I think that's what we're expecting, but that's not really what we're getting. Do I think that we'll get that type of information? I would have to say that it's unlikely. It's unlikely because what that means is that there's going to be an untold number of systems and institutions and powerful people that are going to be disrupted and are going to be, for a figurative term, dethroned.
I think you brought up a really interesting point that I think is going overlooked in the entire Epstein conversation, is that when this was probably a stunt, and you see the conservative podcasters and influencers with the binders excited, leaving the White House with the Epstein documents, and you're thinking about the victims here. You're thinking about, what are the victims thinking, seeing this, knowing what or not knowing what could be redacted, what information about them is in there. So as a lawyer who's litigated cases involving sexual abuse, what do you think's missing from the conversation?
I always think what's missing from the conversation is the impact and the voice of the survivors. And by that, I mean, there is so much shame that's still embedded in the litigation of sexual abuse cases that no one really gets to. These cases usually boil down to what we like to term in normal colloquially as a he say, she say, or he say, or what have you. But what's missing is that the reason why we get to that point in these cases, even to today in 2025, I'm not even talking about cases I have litigated from the 90s, the 70s, the 2000s, the early 2000s. It's because we live in a culture of shame where individuals are silenced, and that's why evidence is lost. That's why we go years without ever having any corroborating evidence. And I think what's missing is that the long-term concealment, which is, again, we have in this case, is what's missing from the conversation. Why is it that, we have these binders, these lists, these folders? Why isn't it a culture? Why isn't it where I can litigate these cases where I'm bringing clients forward and I have that they immediately outcried, that they immediately went to law enforcement. That's the bigger discussion that needs to be had, not so much necessarily the I got you moments. Why is it that it's still so hush hush about who's on the list, who isn't on the list? Why don't men, women, and children feel comfortable today sitting here now in 2025, raising their hand and saying, I was abused, I was sexually assaulted? That's the conversation that I think we're missing.
And going back to this case and seeing what's next, looking at the future here, AG Bondi wrote a pointed letter to FBI Director Kash Patel after this, what many considered botched release of Phase 1, demanding more evidence, more Epstein documents. And she told Fox News this week that the FBI now has a truckload of evidence that they're going through. So hearing that, what are you looking out for next?
I would be looking out for really strong corroborating evidence, and I mean objective evidence, not self-serving evidence. I saw that and I noticed that a piece of what was revealed or content that was revealed from these documents had to do with statements that were made about Mr. Trump being within the residence and that he was not taking part in any activities, which to me, the way they read by this individual seemed to be very self-serving. And I say all that to say this point. What I expect is objective, independent, non-self-serving evidence. I want complete documents. It's what we call, when you're in court and you're on trial and one side, maybe your adversary, reads into the record a portion of a deposition transcript. And that portion sounds so wonderful, you feel like you have a slam dunk score until you read further down in the transcript and you put it into context. So that's what I expect. I expect evidence that's in context, objective, that speaks truth to power. That's what I'm looking for.
I don't think this story is going away anytime soon. And as these other documents come out, as the other phases are dumped, I hope you come back on and join me and break them down. Attorney Judie Saunders, thank you so much for joining me. You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Appreciate it.